The psychology of strategic silence. How to command respect without speaking. Do you ever leave conversations feeling defeated, even when you said all the right things? That sinking feeling in your chest, like your words somehow weakened rather than strengthened your position. You're surrounded by loud voices, interruptions, and people who mistake volume for authority. Society has convinced you that silence equals surrender, that not defending yourself means you've lost. Picture this. You're in a meeting, and someone challenges your idea aggressively. Your instinct screams to fight back, to defend your position with facts and logic. But what if the most powerful response is no response at all? What if your silence creates more psychological pressure than any argument ever could? But what if everything you've been taught about power is backwards? The greatest philosophers understood something most people never will. Those who must speak the loudest are often the weakest. Those desperately trying to convince others have already revealed their insecurity. We're conditioned to believe every conversation is a battlefield where we must fight for our truth. But nature shows us a different path, one that's more subtle, more devastating, and infinitely more intelligent. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's an overwhelming presence that disturbs, destabilizes, and forces others to confront themselves. This video is for you if you constantly feel overlooked, invalidated, or taken advantage of because you're too nice. You've confused your quiet nature with weakness, but today you'll discover that silence can be your most powerful weapon. True victory doesn't come from winning arguments. It comes from never needing to enter them. The ego's desperate need to be right. Why do we feel this overwhelming urge to respond, to correct, to prove our point? Because we've been programmed to believe that truth must be defended at all costs, that remaining silent means letting others win. But this reveals our deepest weakness, the terror of appearing weak. Think about the last time someone criticized you publicly. Remember that burning sensation in your chest, that immediate need to set the record straight? That's your ego hijacking your rational mind, turning you into a puppet dancing to someone else's tune. They pull the strings and you react predictably. Behind this fear lurks the ego, fragile, desperate, and unable to tolerate being questioned. It confuses disagreement with personal attack, turning every conversation into warfare. Most people don't argue to find truth. They argue to feel powerful, to reinforce beliefs that aren't solid, but would crumble if examined too closely. Here's what most people don't realize. Every time you feel compelled to defend yourself, you're actually advertising your insecurities. You're essentially saying, "Please validate me, please tell me I'm right, please don't let me be wrong." This desperation is precisely what manipulative people feed on. Argumentation becomes defensive armor, a desperate cry from the ego to control the narrative. When you feel compelled to justify yourself, you've already lost because the very need to prove your position reveals you're still trapped in seeking approval and validation. If you're recognizing these patterns in your own life, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. PSYPHORIA Zone is your gateway to psychological mastery, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. This is what philosophers call herd morality, living under others' expectations, desperately wanting to be seen as good, correct, and just. But this quest for approval is exactly what keeps you powerless. True strength isn't about convincing others, it's about not needing to do so. Real power means holding your vision despite laughter, criticism, and rejection. It means being misunderstood and remaining unshaken. This isn't measured in verbal victories, but in internal mastery, the ability to stay calm while everyone else loses control. The reactive mind is a conquered mind. The observing mind is dangerous because it's above the need to prove anything. If words betray us, how do we demonstrate strength without speaking? The answer lies in transcending common limitations and dominating through absolute self-control. The psychology of presence over words. True masters don't live by reacting to the world. They shape it through their mere existence. Often they accomplish this in complete silence. They don't need to win debates or engage in emotional manipulation. They observe, understand, and carefully choose when to speak, and more importantly, when to remain silent. They've discovered that silence is its own language, one that doesn't try to convince but imposes presence. This silence isn't empty, it's authority. It's the sound of self-mastery. While others shout, They command respect with their gaze. While others explain, they observe and reveal weaknesses through their calm. Their silence becomes a wall. Those on the other side desperately try to guess what lies behind it, and in that desperation, they make mistakes. They reveal too much. They lose balance. This isn't passivity, it's absolute control of one's energy, strategic economy. Consider how this plays out in real life. When someone attacks you verbally and you remain completely calm and silent, something fascinating happens. They escalate. They get louder, more aggressive, more desperate. Why? Because your silence is forcing them to confront the emptiness of their own argument. You're not giving them the emotional reaction they need to feel powerful. Every spoken word is a revealed move. Every emotional reaction exposes a weakness. That's why masters remain quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't need to say anything. Their presence speaks for them, and more than that, it disturbs because it forces others to confront their own internal noise. In a society of constant chatter, those who master silence become kings. They create their own values, rules, and morality without depending on anyone's validation. This is why they're feared. Nothing destabilizes more than someone who cannot be manipulated by guilt, fear, or the need for acceptance. I want to hear from you in the comments. What's the most powerful silent moment you've ever experienced? Drop your story below, and let's explore the psychology of these moments together. The mirror effect. Why silence unsettles others. Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's a mirror, and what it reflects is often unbearable. When you choose not to react, you're not just staying quiet. You're forcing the other person to hear their own voice, to confront their arguments without external resistance. This destabilizes because most people don't speak to express themselves. They speak to protect themselves, to convince themselves, to hide the emptiness between what they say and who they are. When you remain silent, their disguise falls away. Psychology shows us that in confrontational situations, silence is perceived as judgment. The speaker begins to feel exposed and insecure. Without your response, they lose control of the narrative. The brain goes into alert mode, activating fear and anxiety centers. The other person starts projecting their fears onto you. Are they judging me? Did they notice my insecurity? Do they know I'm bluffing? In this psychological battlefield, silence acts like an invisible blade, cutting where no one sees, but everyone feels. The average person lives as a slave to their reactions, acting on impulse, speaking out of vanity, responding from fear of being forgotten. The superior spirit remains silent because they know every word given is ammunition handed to the enemy. Every emotional reaction is an involuntary scream revealing where to attack. Silence devastates manipulators who depend on emotional reactions to stay in control. When you don't react, you break their cycle and they panic. They need your response to validate their position. Without it, they lose themselves, reveal themselves, show the weakness they've desperately tried to hide. But there's something deeper. Silence triggers unresolved pain, activating traumas of rejection, abandonment, and humiliation. The other person suddenly realizes they're not at the center, that their words aren't enough, that their presence doesn't make an impact. This is intolerable for the narcissistic ego. Here's a psychological truth that will change how you see every interaction. Most people's need to talk, to explain, to convince, stems from childhood wounds. They're still that child desperately seeking attention, validation, approval. When you don't feed this need, when you remain silent, you're essentially holding up a mirror to their deepest insecurities. This is why aggressive people often become more aggressive when met with silence. They're not really angry at you. They're angry at themselves, at their own powerlessness, at the fact that they can't control your response. Your silence becomes a spotlight on their emotional immaturity. When you remain silent, you're not just defending yourself, you're attacking where it hurts most, at the center of their illusion. Weaponizing silence, from defense to dominance. Knowledge without practice is dead theory. It's time to transform your silence into a precision weapon, no longer a defensive shield, but a sharp blade ready to cut through masks at the exact moment they least expect it. The first weapon is restraint. Be silent when everything in you screams for a response. This requires immense strength because every fiber of your being will want to react, justify, and prove you're right. But that desire is poison. Every time you give in, you reveal you're still under others' control, still playing their game. True silence is born when you kill that need. When you understand you owe nothing to anyone, that truth doesn't need to be spoken to exist. The second weapon is observation. While others talk and get lost in explanations, you listen, but not like someone waiting their turn to speak. You listen like a hunter tracking prey. You perceive hidden fears, subtle contradictions, insecurities disguised as arrogance. You store all of this because when you speak, if you speak, it will be surgical, with the precision of someone who has mastered the other's emotional territory. The third weapon is timing. Learn to let silence last. The pause creates tension, and tension is power. While the other person speaks, waiting for your reaction that never comes, they experience internal collapse. Discomfort grows. Their mind fills the void with assumptions, fears, paranoia. A simple look accompanied by silence can have more impact than 10 well-formulated sentences. The fourth weapon is unpredictability. When you master silence, you become unpredictable. The unpredictable is always feared because people don't know what to expect. When they can't predict you, they lose advantage. They become cautious, measuring every word. You invert the interaction's logic. From reactive, you become the gravitational center of conversation. If this psychological approach is reshaping how you see power dynamics, make sure you're subscribed to PSYPHORIA Zone and check out our community tab for exclusive content that goes even deeper into these concepts. But beware, don't confuse silence with passivity. The silence we're discussing is active, tense, charged with intention. You're not withdrawing, you're preparing, choosing, positioning yourself with strength that doesn't need display to be felt. When the right moment comes, when silence has said everything it needed to, you can speak one sentence, make one precise comment that ends the discussion, not because it was louder, but because it was truer, deeper, more undeniable. The dark side, when silence becomes submission. There's a perverse trap many fall into. Being conditioned to think silence is your only option. Swallowing anger, conceding in discussions, avoiding conflict at all costs, mistaking this for maturity. But sometimes this silence isn't wisdom, it's disguised submission. This is where we need to distinguish between two types of silence: the silence of power and the silence of fear. The silence of power is chosen, strategic, and comes from a place of strength. The silence of fear is imposed, habitual, and comes from a place of weakness. Have you noticed how some people exploit your calmness? Your ability to listen, overlook, and avoid confrontation. They push their ideas, impose their will, occupy spaces that were yours, and you let them. You convince yourself it's not worth fighting, that harmony is better, that it's not that important. But here's what's really happening. You're being psychologically conditioned to be the reasonable one, the mature one, the one who keeps the peace. Meanwhile, the aggressive, unreasonable people get what they want. They've learned that if they push hard enough, you'll back down. They've trained you to be silent. But you're paying a high price for this false peace. You're being used by those who understand you'll never react. This is the morality of slaves, that value system constructed by the weak to survive in a world dominated by the strong. It's the morality of resignation, guilt, and being nice. This invisible code teaches you to nullify yourself, diminish yourself, conform, and still feel virtuous for it. But true philosophy wasn't written for those who resign themselves. It was written for those who dare break these chains, who realize they're being used and decide to stop participating in their own submission. When you accept this type of silence, the one that swallows you from within, you surrender your power without realizing it. You're being shaped by others' expectations. You're no longer yourself. You're what others need you to be. This silence of submission must die. In its place, the silence of presence must be born, one that doesn't bend, doesn't humiliate, doesn't apologize for existing. The silence that stands amidst chaos and without saying a word changes the situation's course. Mastering the art of presence. We've reached the crucial understanding. Silence is not absence, not emptiness, not a space between sentences. True silence is pure presence, mastery, the sign that you're no longer reacting to the world but shaping it with your mere existence. The silence of mastery isn't the silence of the oppressed or the coward. It's the silence of the warrior who has already won before the battle begins. It's the stillness of one who no longer needs to prove anything because they know who they are and what they deserve. Look at your life. How many times have you remained silent out of fear, guilt, or not wanting to disturb? How many times have you let others decide for you, speak for you, trample your truth? Living this way is an offense to existence itself. Accepting this kind of silence is betraying yourself. Here's the hard truth. If you're always the one who has to be the bigger person, if you're always the one who has to let it go, if you're always the one who has to keep the peace, then you're not being mature. You're being used. You've become the emotional janitor, cleaning up everyone else's messes while your own needs go unmet. From today on, your silence needs to change its tone. It needs to stop being an escape and become an invisible declaration of authority, a boundary, an affirmation of who you are, even if no one understands. Who you are doesn't need to be understood. It needs to be lived, and that requires courage. Your silence should command respect, not beg for it. It should create space for your truth, not hide from it. When you master this art, you'll discover something profound. The weak shout, the strong remain silent, but the wise choose when to do either. The world doesn't need more talkers. It needs those who master silence and reign with it. Your presence becomes your power, your restraint becomes your strength, and your silence becomes the loudest statement you'll ever make about who you truly are.